All right, folks, we are live here on the stage, and joining me is Fernando Mello, a senior producer at BioWare, and you know what that means, Dragon Age 2 DLC. Fernando, you guys talking about Legacy, just announced it. It's exciting and pretty fun to actually be talking about it, showing it off.
Absolutely. I mean, it's been a long time since we've had some content out. We really wanted to go back to basics, really look at what the feedback was from Dragon Age launch, and then try to build that into the content. So we're very, very happy to finally be able to talk about what we've been working on all this time, and particularly the fact that it's our main story-based DLC, and the first one since we launched is great.
Yeah, now a story-based DLC, that's always carries a little more weight with it, especially with such a story-driven game like Dragon Age 2. Give folks a little bit of context where this saga is taken, where this DLC is taking Dragon Age.
Yeah, so I mean, you can actually play the DLC from any point in the main game.
Okay.
But really, the story revolves around Hawke and the family, and particularly the father character, who we only really talk about very briefly in sort of codex entries and things on Dragon Age 2. But here, you're going to get a chance to really explore a lot more of that background. You kind of find yourself in all new areas. You're going to be able to dive very deep into a Grey Warden prison. So there's Grey Wardens, there's Darkspawn, there's all sorts of wonderful stuff in there, and it's pretty meaty. Now,
Grey Warden prison, you mentioned that earlier, and is it a prison for Grey Wardens, like gone rogue, or is it a prison only staffed by Grey Wardens?
It's interesting that you asked that question, but no. The Grey Warden
that
prison...
wasn't a yes or no question?
Well, there's some elements to that, actually,
oh, okay.
But... what's actually happened is they're actually containing a very powerful Darkspawn creature in there. So they've built this prison around the creature, they've kind of sealed it in over time, and Hawke is kind of being thrust into the middle of all this and trying to figure out what to do about it.
Okay, now so once again, playing as Hawke and, you know, evolving your character, picking up new weapons, that's part of the fun of Dragon Age 2. Talk to us about how, you know, new stuff or any sort of different ways, sort of character advancement wise, how is Legacy going to handle that?
Yeah, so of course there's going to be lots of wonderful loot in there. I think the team has done a fantastic job of adding a lot of extra areas to this. There's lots of side content that you can explore, which has great rewards as well. There's actually a couple Easter eggs in there, which is great. But one of the more interesting things, which you kind of presented earlier, was the fact that there's this unique upgradable weapon, which is a first that we've done. So one of the things is that you can actually upgrade it and customize it to how you want to play. So if you're a very offensive-minded player, perhaps you're a rogue, like the example that we showed, you might want to go for sort of like critical based upgrades, so critical damage percent or any of that kind of stuff. Maybe if you're a mage, you might want to do some more defensive stuff or mana regeneration or something along those lines. But effectively, by customizing the weapon and then being able to take it beyond the DLC, either back into the main game or into future content, I think that's actually really cool and very unique.
And so we're actually seeing, right now we're running the footage from the press conference, that weapon in this character's right hand is his version of the weapon you're talking about?
That's right, yeah. So depending on which class you're playing, and in this case with the rogue, he's using his daggers, so you get a dagger weapon. And the weapon actually works sort of like a key. It's tied to the story of what's happening in the DLC, but basically Hawke is using this weapon to break these magical seals on his way to deal with this ancient evil, this very powerful Darkspawn figure. And he uses that by, or he breaks through the seals by using this key, this weapon.
Now, we are live, and so we're taking some questions here through the chat room.
Awesome.
Lonky Lanky asks about new characters, and you sort of alluded to more characters in the Hawke family, but anyone else you can tell us about here that's going to
So there's no new followers that are added to the party, for example.
Okay.
There's obviously a lot of new characters that you'll come across. You'll actually meet some Grey Warden characters and some other interesting things. The one nice thing is that all of the followers, any of the followers you can bring with you, including Sebastian Vale, which was our first DLC, they all have tremendous banter. They all have a lot of reactivity to the game. Some characters more than others. Again, the content is largely around Hawke and the family, so if you have one of the siblings with you, you're obviously going to get a lot more wealth of information from that as they respond to what's happening.
There you go, pro tip, folks.
Yeah, exactly. But there's also a couple of really interesting characters. You actually meet some Carta dwarves, so bringing Varric along is going to reveal a lot of interesting information around there and some extra scenes. As well, not to kind of spoil it for those that are perhaps still playing Dragon Age 2 for the first time, but if you still have certain family members around in the game, there's also some extra scenes there as well.
All right, kept that nice and vague. I like
Hopefully,
it.
hopefully.
Now, a lot of Dragon Age 2 took place inside this sort of sprawling city. But now you mentioned new areas.
Yes.
Are we venturing far outside the realms that we've been in before?
Yeah, so you're back in the Vimark Mountains. This is an area that did exist in Dragon Age 2, but this is all new areas. You have never explored this part of the mountain range. The mountain range is actually quite huge. So this is all completely new areas, both the exterior areas that you'll be walking through, as well as when you make your way deep into the Grey Warden prison, you're actually going to find all of these new places to explore, and there's quite a lot of it as well, which is great.
Very cool. Now, the mountains obviously offer a lot of rough going, so no doubt an abundance of strange creatures.
There are.
And you mentioned some new Darkspawn. Are we going to see some? Can you give us a? There was one particular Darkspawn that we saw in the press conference. I'm not sure you folks got to see it in that demo just now. So can you describe that with the big?
Yeah. So the Genlock Alpha, awesome creature. So this guy, like this massive creature, and it's got this super powerful shield that it uses to really good effect. So you're going to see some very interesting tactics around it. Trying to do sort of a frontal assault, you're going to get yourself into trouble. Particularly with the rogue, you really want to get behind this creature. But we've also introduced just regular Genlocks as well that do not have the shield. Now this is more of a mob creature. They're still very big, very brutish, so you got to watch out for them. But that's another new creature in there. Another example is a Hurlock Alpha, a brand new creature. Originally came in the Dragon Age lore in Origins. We kind of brought him back. It's now being redone in the new art style of DA2. And has some surprises in store in terms of his tactics and abilities as well.
Now you mentioned tactics. That Genlock Alpha you were talking about, you're just sort of wandering around down a corridor. You know, this seems you're not in combat or anything. When then boom, all of a sudden this ambush just like comes right out. This giant shield. Environment. You were mentioning during the show that enemies are using their environment to their advantage a lot more. Can you give us an example about that?
Yeah, well, the example there, of it trying to use that narrow corridor to kind of hold you back and to great effect. There's a lot of other areas that are like that. There's a lot of vertical elements in some of the spaces that you're playing in as well. There's things like traps that you can use to your advantage or enemies will use against you. So I think there's a lot more in the tactical breadth of what you can do to kind of solve some of these problems. But I guess the best way to think about it is you're coming in as sort of the outsider. You're entering their territory, so you're sort of walking in at a disadvantage. So be prepared to be surprised, but certainly not in the sense of what we saw with DA2. That was some great feedback that we received, sort of the wave combats and things like that. We absolutely spent a lot of time in this, making sure that tactically the battles are going to be set up in a much nicer way, and also just generally how creatures are entering combat will make a lot more sense, and I think people will be very happy with that as well.
Sounds like a great mix of responding to the fans, to the comments, and also giving them more of what they want. And it sounds like it might be a little tougher as well.
It depends. I mean, you can come in at any point in the game as well, right? Now, it does kind of scale to your level.
Great.
But yes, I mean, we want to make sure that you have a nice challenge. And you shouldn't need to crank it up to nightmare mode to feel that. You should be able to play it normal if you want to and feel like you're being challenged. And
well, Fernando, Dragon Age 2 Legacy, when can folks get their hands on it and take on the challenge for themselves?
Not too far from now. So later this month, July 26th, on all 4 platforms, Xbox 360, PlayStation 3, PC, and Mac. So pretty soon.
Great. Fernando, thank you so much for coming by the show and showing it off, talking about Dragon Age 2 Legacy.
My pleasure.